Today. All right, that was such a great greeting. I loved it. I'm so excited to be hanging out here with you. If it's your first time, welcome. I am so glad you are here. You have picked a great Sunday to spend with us here at Legacy Church. We are just wrapping up a series on Ruth. It's a 4-week series, 85 verses. We've just been walking through the 4 chapters. We have arrived to chapter 4. We're going to get into that today. But before we do that, I have a question for you. I need you to help me complete the phrase, okay? Ready? You can just answer out loud. That's the type of church we are here. You can just talk out loud. The grass is always greener. Okay, some of you said the other side. I heard some other murmurs. Maybe some of you said the grass is greener where you water it, right? Or maybe you said the grass is greener because it's fake, right? There's AstroTurf now. We have to acknowledge that here in 2025, right? Maybe some of you said the grass is greener because it's not mine, right? It's the neighbor's grass that I'm constantly looking at that is absolutely beautiful because they spend a lot of money on fertilizer. And so that's how we feel sometimes. The grass is greener on the other side. And so if you're like me, you've probably spent a few moments of your life admiring the success of other people, right? We can put our hands up. We've all done it from time to time. Like maybe you just saw somebody and you thought, man, they have the perfect family, right? Like their kids are just so well behaved. They never seem to fight. They get the Christmas picture done on the first take, right? It's a miracle. And you're like, how do they do it? How do they do it? The kids are getting good grades in school. Oh my goodness. And perhaps you're admiring somebody that's just, you feel like they have amazing character. They're kind and they're confident and they're funny and they're smart. And you're like, how did you get this way? I am so stressed out. And then there's other people we admire that they just have some amazing achievements, right? Like maybe you admire an entrepreneur. They just keep starting businesses, and you're like, where do you get all these ideas? Or maybe you've watched somebody else kind of climb the ranks in their corporate job, just keep getting promotion after promotion. Or maybe you're eyeing somebody up that they just seem so financially stable. They got in on Bitcoin when the Bitcoin was like $5 and now it's worth a lot of money. You're like, how did they know to choose Bitcoin? But I think one of the things we forget is when we do that is we are looking at their current season. And what I mean by that is it's like looking at somebody's Instagram reel, right? It's just the highlight reel of their life. That's what we see when we look at others on the outside, where every day we're living our lives and sometimes we do not feel like it feels like an Instagram reel, right? But we forget that there's other seasons that people live leading up to that season. And we don't always see the season of all the private disciplines that have been lived out. We don't see the struggles with self-doubt and self-worth. We don't see the seasons of tragedy and just unimaginable loss. We don't see all those things. We don't see how God has carried them through. We just see what we see on the surface. And so that's what the story of Ruth is. It's really a story of loss and legacy. And because we're at the end of the book, we get to the legacy part. That's the name of our church. And all a legacy is, it's what you leave behind when you leave. That's all legacy is. It's what you leave when you leave. And so I think sometimes for us, we have to recognize and ask ourselves this question: what if our greatest impact comes after some of our hardest seasons in life? Like, what if this difficult season that I'm walking through, this difficult relationship, this difficult financial time, that God is working in and through those moments? I just want to give you kind of a phrase to kind of frame our time together here today. It's that the decisions that we make today will determine the legacy that we leave tomorrow. So the decisions that we make today will determine the legacy we leave tomorrow. And so we've already established that a legacy is what you leave when you leave. And so as we walk through Ruth chapter 4, I just want to pull out, there's so many principles, but we're just going to pull out 5 today. We're going to look at a guy named Boaz and a girl named Ruth, but we're kind of going to hone in on Boaz because he kind of gives us a blueprint for leaving a legacy. So these are 5 moves that will outlast us. And so that's what a legacy is. We all dream of leaving a legacy. What will we leave behind when we're gone? Can I just tell you, we can do a lot of great things in this life, but none of that matters if we don't leave a legacy for Jesus. He has to be all over our story. And if he's not, at the end of the day, our story is not going to matter. Doesn't matter how many promotions you got. Doesn't matter that you joined the 1,000-point club on your high school basketball team. None of that matters if Jesus is not front and center in our story and legacy. So let me just give you a little bit of context if you're unfamiliar with the story of Ruth. The story of Ruth starts out with a woman named Naomi and her family, Elimelech and her 2 sons. They leave where they are in Bethlehem and they head to a place called Moab. It was a foreign land. They worshiped pagan gods there, and they left because there was a famine. And 10 years wouldn't go by until her son, Naomi's husband, would pass away, and her 2 sons would pass away after they got married. And so they kind of got to this crossroads where Naomi hears that God was doing some amazing things back home. And so she says, I have to go check it out for my own eyes. And so she prepares to head back. And at that very moment, her 2 newly widowed daughters-in-laws are considering what they should do. One is named Orpah and the other Ruth. And so Orpah stays back in Moab. She does not come, but Ruth says, listen, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And so she goes with her. She travels back to Bethlehem. Just this 50-mile trip. But it took her 10 years to get back home. And they come back with nothing, these 2 poor widows. And they're out in the fields, and Naomi is sending Ruth out into the fields to glean, to pick up some wheat and some barley for them. She's picking up, and that's where she ends up gleaning in the field of a man named Boaz, a kind landowner. He starts to take notice to her, and then we saw that in chapter 3, it kind of got a little bit weird because her mother-in-law, Naomi, said, listen, I want you to go and I want you to approach Boaz because he's actually a kinsman redeemer. I'll show you what that is in just a moment. But she says, I want you to go approach him. And so she went and she laid at his feet in the middle of the night. And you better believe that startled him, kind of woke him up at midnight. But that was kind of a sign of submission and humility because she had come to ask him a very important question. And she said, will you spread the corner of your garment over me? Which meant, listen, you're in a position to redeem me. I'm a childless widow. Our family name will not continue. And there was much hardship in front of her. And so that was a customary way to say, will you spread your covering over me? Will you be my protector, not just physically, but spiritually? Will you lead me? Will you take me as your wife? Will you marry me? And of course, Boaz is like, whoa, he's blown away because she did it in such a honoring and humble way. But Boaz knew that he wasn't the closest kinsman redeemer, and so he had to go find out if this other kinsman redeemer who was closer in relation would redeem her first. And so what is a kinsman redeemer? We kind of see this phrase throughout the book. And so this is what it is. It's really 4 things, and we get this from the Old Testament here, and so we'll put it up for you. The first thing a kinsman redeemer could do is to buy a fellow Israelite out of slavery. You see, sometimes they would default on their loans, and they would end up in slavery, and so a kinsman redeemer would bring them back out of slavery. And in the case of murder, that person's no longer there, and so the kinsman redeemer would find justice for that individual. The third thing is they'd be able to buy back family land. We're going to see that in chapter 4 today. And finally, number 4, they could carry on the family name by marrying a childless widow. That is what Ruth is in our story. So that's a little bit of context for you. So we kind of pick up today. It's a little bit of a cliffhanger because what happens is in the morning, Boaz has sent Ruth home with some grain, a little gift to bring back to her mother-in-law, Naomi. And so he's like, listen, I'm going to figure this out. Either this guy is going to redeem you or I'm going to redeem you, but somebody is going to redeem you. And so she's at home and she's waiting with her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law, Naomi, is telling her, listen, he's not going to rest until he figures this out today. And wouldn't you know it, Boaz does not waste any time. And so let's jump in together. This is Ruth chapter 4. We're going to start reading in verse 1 together. It says, meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, come over here, my friend, and sit down. So he went over and sat down. And so what's important here is it says the town gate. And you're like, I don't get it. My town doesn't have a gate. Well, this was kind of a public forum or a city council. This is where all the wisest people would gather. They would handle legal matters in this spot. And so here's Boaz. He's waiting and hoping that this guy that's a closer in relation kinsman redeemer that has basically first right of refusal to redeem Ruth would walk by and he would see him. And so that's exactly what happened. He is waiting with bated breath, and this guy comes by and he's like, perfect. I have to talk to you. Sit down. So that's what we see here. We see it says friend, but that's kind of a generous and loose translation. But what we actually see in the original text is it's Mr. No Name, the guy with no name, basically. And the author doesn't give us a name. Perhaps the author here is Samuel. We're not entirely sure for Ruth, but we don't have a name for this guy. And it wasn't that he didn't have a name, it's just that the author left it out. Boaz absolutely knew this guy's name, but we're going to see that he's not deserving of his name to be recorded in the story in a little bit. So he's calling him friend. That's how we see it translated here in the NIV, but it's really in the original Mr. No Name. He's without name. So he kind of catches this guy with the element of surprise. Now, he's not trying to trick him. He's not trying to do anything kind of sleight of hand or anything like that, but he is trying to make stuff happen. Where are my people out here that just get stuff done? Like the sun comes up, the sun hasn't even come up, and you're just like crushing a task list. That's what's going on here. He wants to do things the right way, and so he's assembled a legal council. He's going to get this matter handled ASAP. And so he doesn't even bother putting it down on his to-do list. He's just like, let's go. Sun's up, let's get it done. And so the first principle that we can kind of glean from this for the blueprint here, for our legacy, things that will outlive us, is this, that we should be bold. That initiative opens the door to impact. I think so many times in our life, we're just afraid to take that initial step. Maybe God's got you here today because he's wanting you to take another step closer to him. I think sometimes we worry about where other people are at spiritually. Oh, they're taking steps over here, man. They're starting ministries, and they're going to go to seminary, and they're going on a mission trip. Just take the step right in front of you where you're at. Don't worry about anybody else. But we see this very bold initiative here with him. And so bold initiatives will always build legacies. Maybe he's calling you to just pray. Maybe this week you're just going to pray. Maybe God's telling you, I'm just going to spend some time and talk to God every single day. Maybe God's saying, listen, you got to get involved in a faith community. Next week we're launching our life groups. Maybe he's calling you to get out of rows and get into circles and start doing life together with other believers. Maybe he's calling you to serve. Maybe he's calling you to give and be generous. Maybe he's just calling you to love somebody in need, but we have to start. We have to be bold. We have to take that initiative like we see that Boaz is doing here. And so in verse 2 it says, Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, sit here, and they did so. So he's kind of assembling a court almost. He's inviting them to bear witness to what's going on because he wants it to be transparent. He wants it to be lawful. He wants it to be accountable. This isn't some kind of kangaroo court he's putting together. This isn't a backroom deal. This is not manipulation. He's not trying to get one over on this guy. He just wants it on the books, and he wants to do it the right way. He has integrity. And so the second thing we see here from this in verse 2 is that we should be accountable. Because truth, it builds up what time cannot tear down. And you know this, and I do this, but when we don't do things the right way, truth and time always walk together. That's what my mentor always told me. And so he knows he needs to go about this the right way, not cut any corners. And so he wants witnesses. He wants everything done right. Because what he's about to do here matters. Because he loves Ruth. So he's not willing to cut any corners. And so the truth in all of this, his integrity will stand the test of time. He wants to be accountable not only before God, but before man as well. Proverbs 10:9 says, whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. And so it wasn't like he was trying to assassinate this other guy's, Mr. No Name's character. He was really putting his own character on trial. He was saying, listen, I'm going to do things the right way. I want to be accountable, not only to Ruth, but to Naomi. I want to be accountable for this entire process. Verse 3 goes on to say, then he said to the guardian redeemer, that's the person who was closer in relation, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So Elimelech was Naomi's husband that passed away when they went to Moab. And so he kind of just lets this little line float out. And if you're like this guy, all he hears is real estate is available, like an investment. Woo, this is good, right? And it's one of these cases here where we're going to see he kind of answers before he gets all of the information. Anybody have that problem but me? Like you just throw an answer out there before you know everything that's going on. That's what we're going to see here. But I think this is very strategic. Boaz was a strategic guy. And so he starts with saying, man, there's a deal on some land, and you can do this. You can redeem this land of somebody in your family. And so verse 4 says, and I thought I should bring the matter to you for your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it, he said. So we see his intentions are clear. He's like, you have an opportunity to do it, but just know, if you don't do it, I'm here, I'm waiting, and I am able. He makes himself extremely clear. And the other redeemer, he's just like, well, yeah, I'll do it, of course, right? He just gets his yes out just a little bit too quickly here, right? But what's so interesting is we don't know this. We don't know if Ruth and Naomi are nearby, but I just kind of imagine if they were perhaps maybe even eavesdropping on this, if they were just like, we really wanted Boaz. I guess this guy will do. He's going to do it too. But like, their hearts would just sink in that moment. Because Ruth loved Boaz and Boaz loved Ruth. But again, his intentions are clear. He didn't hesitate. He was ready to redeem. He was ready to act. And so the principle here is that we need to be ready. That we can be responsible. Because responsibility is the road to legacy. It's so important for us to lead with integrity and responsibility. I think a lot of times we think about responsibility and we think about like applause and recognition, but it really doesn't begin with any of those things. It just begins with the readiness to respond. And so we see that Boaz had already premeditated his response, because we see that back in chapter 3. He already said, listen, if this guy doesn't do it, I'm going to do it. He already had his decision made. He was doing the right thing one way or the other. She was going to be redeemed. And so we see with this perfect timing now at this point, Boaz is going to offer some more details for us in verse 5. It says, then Boaz said, on the day you buy the land for Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. He's like, all right, you didn't read the fine print, so here it is. This is a package deal, right? A package deal. There's property, and then there's persons and property. And we see it says, at this, the guardian redeemer said that I cannot redeem it because it might endanger my own estate. You redeem it for yourself. I cannot do it. And so there's a lot of debate as to why he says this, but scholars believe it's most likely because his estate had already been divided. He already had sons. And if he was to marry Ruth and she was to have more children, then it would be divided a little bit more. They would get a smaller piece of the pie, and so he's not willing to do that. And if he has sons already, he probably has a wife. And he knows a second wife might cause some troubles, but in this situation with the guardian redeemer, there was allowance within the law for him to do that. But he's like, no, I'm not doing that. And we get a kind of a glimpse and a view into his heart here. He was only in it for the land, for the field. He wasn't in it for the love. He was just in it for what he could get out of it. But once he realized it was going to be difficult and challenging, and it wasn't just going to be easy and a quick cash grab, he was out. And so if you're Ruth and Naomi and you're watching at this point, you're like, yes! Like, they're pumped up. They're jazzed up at this point. They're like, yes, Boaz! Like, I don't even know if they were there. But if they were, man, they would be so stoked at this point, right? And so then we see this. In verse 7, it's in parentheses in the NIV, it says, now in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. I read that. I'm like, that sounds crazy. Like, are they getting like a Birkenstock? Like, what kind of, is it like a Costco one? Like, what kind is it? And so I just want to take us back. I'm going to read this real quick. We're going to go back to Deuteronomy 25. I'm going to read verses 5 through 10 for you. And so we get a little bit of context for what is going on here. It says, if brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her to fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. So we see that kinsman redeemership is happening right here. However, if a man does not want to marry his brother's wife, and so culturally it was the thing you were supposed to do, but it wasn't an obligation. That's what it's saying here. She'll have to go to the elders at the town gate and say, my husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel, and he will not fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to me. Then the elders of the town shall summon him and take him. If he persists in saying, I do not want to marry her, his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, take off one of his sandals, and spit in his face. What? This is awesome. And say, this is what is done to the man who will not build up his brother's family line. That man's line shall be known in Israel as the family of the unsandaled. Man, that is crazy, right? Like, I'm just thinking, like, in today's day and age, man, like this crazy scene's going on. Like, today you just, like, unfollow them on Instagram, right? Like, you just don't follow them anymore. But no, there's, like, spitting going on. It's crazy. And so bro not only just lost his legacy, he lost his sandal too. And I started thinking, like, I wonder if it was like a Croc or something, right? Because Crocs are like the official shoe of regret. I'm teasing you. But at least they're ventilated, right? All right, I digress. But like, it's crazy. Like, that's very foreign to us. But basically what it meant was he was saying, listen, I'm not going to claim this land. I'm not going to set foot on this land, so I'm going to take off my sandal to show that I will not be claiming this land. That's basically what it signifies here, all joking aside. So in verse 8 it says, so the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed his sandal. Thankfully, it wasn't a big disgrace. He did not spit in, and nobody was spitting in anybody's face this time around. Verse 9, then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought for Naomi the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with the property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses. And so Boaz makes this public proclamation. He makes these vows, and he wants all of them to bear witness to this. And this kind of explains for us why a marriage ceremony is so important. It's because you're not just saying, I love you, and the other person saying, love you. You're doing it in front of your friends and your peers. You're making it official. You're not hiding your love. And so Boaz is not willing to hide his love and affection and honor that he has for Ruth. He's not doing this just to get the land. He loves Ruth and he wants to redeem her. That's what we see here. And so the fourth principle is this, to be redeemed. Because really, redemption launches the legacy. That's the foundation of the legacy. If we are not redeemed, there is no legacy. We're going to talk about what that legacy looks like in just a moment. But it's so important because redemption is actually where the legacy begins. It's where it starts. Because try as we might on our own, our legacy will not last if it's not built on the legacy of Jesus. And the legacy of Jesus is always worth telling. Verse 11 goes on, it says, then the elders and all the people of the gate said, we are witnesses. So they're witnessing this whole thing. And then they exclaim this, I love this, may the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel or Leah. So she's talking about the two mothers of the nation of Israel. These women of stature, married to Jacob, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah to be famous in Bethlehem through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman. May your family be like that of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah. And so we see that Perez was one of the sons of Judah, an ancestor of the Bethlehemites. I love that. It says, we are witnesses. The whole community saw it. They witnessed the whole thing. And the fifth and final principle I just want to give you today is that to be seen. Because legacy is built when others tell the story and they declare God's glory. I don't mean bragging on yourself like, look what I've done. That's not what I'm talking about. This is all in humility here. Like, what would it look like if we lived in a culture where we talked about what God had done? If those were the things that people saw. Not like, hey, look what I did, I'm so great. But being seen is all about, look what God has done. Because don't you think all these witnesses turned around and they went and said, man, you'll never believe what I saw today at the city gate. There was this guy named Boaz who had true love for this girl, Ruth. And he went all in, man. It cost him some money for the land. And she was a lot younger. There's a little age gap there, but he loved her so much. He redeemed her. Can I just tell you some good news, right? We need some more feel-good stories like that in our news. But what if we did that in our own lives? What if we took time to identify all these little God moments? I think sometimes we try to just see like the big miracles, these massive things. The whole time we're missing all these little moments that God is orchestrating in our lives. And the common thread that's woven throughout this entire story is the providence of God. The providence of God. It's how he uses the natural to accomplish his supernatural will. That's what the providence of God is. And so we see that God is orchestrating all these natural human relationships. We're going to see the birth of a baby in just a moment. That's a natural thing too. That God is using the natural to accomplish his good and perfect supernatural will. And these aren't perfect people. They're broken people, just like you and I. I think when we look at ourselves, we disqualify ourselves right away, like, God couldn't use me. I just want to remind you that he used Ruth. She wasn't of Jewish descent. She was from a foreign pagan worshiping land. They worshiped the god of Chemosh. It's all about child sacrifice, crazy stuff. And then God got a hold of her life. And then God did this. That's how he wants to write your story. But I think sometimes we're so worried about being seen by others instead of showing off. Look what God's doing in my life. Look how he loves me. Look how he provides for me. Look how he encourages me in his word. We need to start bragging on those things, because when we brag on those things, we're bragging on God. There's somebody in your life that needs to hear about the goodness of God. Maybe you're here today and you need to continue to hear about the goodness of God. Maybe you're here today because God is here to redeem you. That's why you're here. And so I just want to encourage you with that fact. Because when we got something good, we don't keep it to ourselves, right? We want to share it. We want to get it out there. And so the community saw it. They celebrated it. They repeated it, and then they passed it down. Verse 13 says, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and when he made love to her, that the Lord enabled her to conceive. The natural providence of God right there. And she gave birth to a son. It's the natural occurrence. There's no big flashy miracles in this story. Just the providence of God at work in everyday people's lives like you and I. It's beautiful. And so we see that Boaz's responsibility and Ruth's responsibility was obedience. And God's responsibility is always the outcome. God was always faithful. He never changes. But we see how God has been honoring the faith of these two individuals here. And they're starting to look back on everything that's already transpired in their life and like, wow, God, you are orchestrating all this. You are working in my problems. You are working in my mess because you love me. Starting to get their minds blown here. Verse 14 says, the woman said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he be famous throughout Israel. I love this. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth. And so we see the women of Israel are bestowing this beautiful blessing on Naomi. And if you remember back from the beginning of our series, we talked about her name. It means pleasant, right? And when she gets back at the end of chapter 1, she's like, nah, I'm changing my name. Call me Mara now. It means bitter. I'm bitter. And that's how we feel. We feel bitter sometimes. But look how God's worked. Look how he's moved. Her past didn't disqualify her. God was working the entire time. God is a God who specializes in redemption. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son. And they named him Obed. And he was the father of Jesse and the father of David. In other words, Naomi is one happy grandmother, right? Because when your children are happy, you are happy. She was sharing in that same blessing, that same joy, because now she was a grandmother. And so they didn't just receive the blessing here. They became the blessing for future generations. That's what we see here. That's what God is orchestrating here. A blessing for future generations. Can I just encourage you for a moment? The decisions you make today, they're not just going to impact the legacy you think it's going to impact. It's going to impact generations of people that you'll never meet, you'll never see. Think about that. Think about how God works. It's beyond your wildest imagination. Beyond our greatest expectations, that is who God is. That's how he works. He's got this. I just want to read you the genealogy at the end. It's verses 18 through 22. It says this. This then is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Amminadab. Wow, I'll be glad you don't have that name, right? Amminadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz. Boaz the father of Obed. Obed the father of Jesse. And Jesse the father of David. And so we see a genealogy. But when we see this genealogy, it's just a list of broken people, just like us, that God used and he worked through. But these people were part of a legacy, something bigger than themselves. So we see that this genealogy, it stops after David, King David, one of the greatest men in the Old Testament, a man after God's own heart. He'd be one of the greatest kings that the nation of Israel ever had. Because it's because of a man named Boaz who came and redeemed a lady named Ruth. But what's crazy about Boaz is Boaz's mom was a prostitute. She was a prostitute we see in Joshua chapter 6. She lived in the wall. She's the one who hid the spies. So there's all this dysfunction, all this messed up stuff, and yet God is using it for his good and for his glory. We see this beautiful genealogy, and a genealogy is just a testament to the goodness of God, his faithfulness, that his promises will endure for generation and generation, that they're not going to return void. That's what this is. It's a snapshot of the promise of God. It's beautiful. It'd be 27 generations later, Jesus would be born in this genealogy. That Jesus would come from the son of a prostitute, from the mother of a pagan foreign land. I tell you that because that should give us hope. That we have worth, that we are redeemable ourselves, that we're not too far gone. And so, as we look at this story, we see that Boaz was a kinsman redeemer. He was a guardian redeemer for Ruth, but this is really just a bigger and better picture because Boaz is just a type of Christ. See this beautiful foreshadowing of what Jesus would do. I'll just give you these real fast. These are 5 ways Boaz foreshadowed that Jesus would eventually fulfill. The first one is this: they redeemed willingly. Boaz didn't have to redeem Ruth. He wanted to do so out of love. And Jesus would say the same thing. He's like, listen, nobody takes my life. I freely lay it down. I freely pick it up. It's because I love you. They're the same. They willingly redeemed. And then they paid the cost, right? Boaz had to buy the field. But Jesus had to shed his blood. That's the cost he paid. He would do that for you and I. There's always a cost to redemption. The third thing is this: they redeemed outsiders. They redeemed outsiders. Ruth the Moabite, a foreigner, a widow, someone without legal standing, someone people would frown upon. Nobody would help her. And Jesus comes to redeem sinners, broken, messed up people like you and I. People that didn't deserve a chance. That's why he came, man, to redeem the outsiders. It's good news. Fourth thing is this: they restored what was lost. You see, not only did Boaz restore the family line, buy back the land, help the legacy continue, but we see that Jesus did that. Because without Jesus, we cannot have a relationship with the Father. There's this chasm, there's this gap, there's this separation. Without him, there is no relationship with the Father. It's impossible. But then God sent his Son to make it possible that we would have salvation. And salvation in Jesus leads to eternal life. And so redemption doesn't just save, it restores. It's the good news. And the fifth and final one, I love this one. They acted publicly to secure redemption. And so we see that Boaz is at the city gate and he assembles all the witnesses. He wants it to be official. He's not cutting any corners. That's what Jesus did. He died in a very public and graphic way in front of many witnesses. So there wouldn't be any question of his love and his capability. And then he wouldn't die at the city gate. He would die outside the city gates. But here's where the story ends. See, that wasn't the end. Because 3 days later, God would raise him from the dead. And there would be witnesses to that too. Witnesses to his resurrection. That he defeated the grave, that he came back, that only he had the power to do so. There's no other God under heaven that would sacrifice their Son for broken people like us. And so that's the beauty. Boaz just points to a greater coming, a greater Savior, and his name is Jesus. And so I just want to ask you today, you don't have to answer me, but just answer this in your heart. What are you going to do with the time you have left? Because you're going to leave a legacy. Might be about yourself. But how cool would it be if it was a legacy of the goodness of God? How he got a hold of a wretched sinner like me and like you. He started to restore our souls. Started to give us hope. Help us put one foot in front of the other to face tomorrow. Man, that would be a story worth telling. And so if that's you today, can I just encourage you as we get ready to pray in this moment, to just cry out, to have a conversation, to say, God, I want a legacy that honors you. I want a legacy that echoes for generations, that will just ripple on into eternity. God, I want that kind of legacy, but I don't want it for myself. I want it so that people that are far from God find new life in Jesus. Maybe that's you today. Maybe you don't have new life in Jesus. Maybe today is the day you let God redeem you. Ephesians 2:8-9 talks about this. It's by grace, through faith, that we're saved. It's not by works. It's not by going to church. It's not by doing a bunch of good stuff. Why? So that we can't boast and brag like, hey, look what I did. I got myself to heaven. It's so that God gets the glory. Maybe today you surrender before the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and you give him the glory that he is due. And it doesn't mean when you open your eyes after you pray or you wake up tomorrow that your life's going to be perfect and you're not going to walk through heartbreak and loss and pain. But what it means is you don't walk alone. You walk with the King of Kings. And so, Father, we love you. God, we're a broken generation. We didn't deserve your mercy. We don't deserve your faithfulness. You love us despite our mistakes. You sent your son, Jesus. And so, God, today, we just want to declare this as a church, as a group of people, that we want our legacy to matter. That it would make an impact in eternity. And so if you're here today and you've never entered into a personal relationship with Jesus, you don't have to wait any longer. You can just cry out to God. He's already paid the price. He's already redeemed you. All that's left is to receive it. And so just talk to him. Say, God, I'm a sinner. I've fallen short, but I believe you sent Jesus. God, I believe you raised him 3 days later. So God, I want to live my days for you. God, I want to build your legacy, not my own. And God, for the rest of us, help us to chase after you. Help us to take that first step of initiative. To not procrastinate, to not put off, but to chase you with every ounce, every fiber of our being. God, help us chase you. God, we love you. It's your son's precious name we pray. Amen.